that others will be joining us that we can't see, but we'll know that will be with us as we go through this lesson. But before we start, I guess the prayer request that we got on our phones this morning was one of the most urgent that I know I've ever gotten, and probably more than others. Tom Childs and Brenda Childs' daughter, Sandra, is in Erlanger with COVID, and they said a while ago when she called that she would, the next hour, the next 2 hours at that time, would determine whether she lives or whether she dies. So let's stand and take her to the Lord in prayer to begin our lesson today. Father, we love you and we praise you. We come to you and ask you to bless this word and give us strength from it. Draw us closer to you. And we lift up Sandra Childs to you this morning, Lord God, and we ask that you spare her, that you touch that body, touch those lungs, and help her to recover. Bring her back, God. Work a miracle in our church and in that hospital room. Father, put your hand upon her. We'll give you the praise and the honor and the glory for it. In Jesus' name we pray. Thank you so much. The title of our lesson today is Our Responsibility for God's Creation. You remember the start of this series of lesson today was every one of us has been about the creation and God making it and giving it to us and the things that we should appreciate. And this follows up on that. Makes it a little bit harder because we can enjoy the creation, all the things He's done for us, until He tells us, you've also got a responsibility. We have, and to keep and maintain and promote that creation and make others aware of it. And that's what this lesson is about today. And it really tells us that just as Adam was a caretaker in the Garden of Eden when everything was exactly as it should be, we should take that same responsibility today. I know that we can watch the news and read a newspaper, and they talk a lot about that, the climate and change and all those things, and we don't know sometimes whether that's real or what's not, but we can look around, and when the oceans and the streams are filled with litter, when the landfills are running over, and when we're an instant society that want convenience and things fast, and we discard and throw away and these things, we could say, well, in the environment itself, are we really responsible? Are we really preserving the things that's got us? But mainly what this lesson is about today is to give us an awareness, telling us to look around about us of all the things that God has given us and to really blessing to us, and to appreciate them and to love Him for it and to preserve them also. And the first thing, I guess, that we've got to look at and realize is say that He is our Creator. And the Lord took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden. And this is the hard part. He said He put Adam in there to dress it up, or to till the soil and to keep it, to preserve it. So I guess that's where it comes into us today, that we're to keep it, and we are to preserve the things that's given us, but we're to have an awareness of it. And when we know that something is valuable to us, we protect it and see that it's not lost or not damaged, because it means a lot. And all that God's given us is just that important to us, and we should work and keep it. First of all, we got to realize that He created us. He's our maker. Sometimes we think we're great and we've accomplished a whole lot of things, but we really haven't, because He made us. He made us the way that we are, and He prepared us to do His will in the things, and we should give Him the credit for it. So first of all, say, God, thank you. Before all the things, before the mountains and the streams and all the things that we'll study about today, thank you for creating me, giving us health and giving us strength, and most of all, giving us life and an awareness of Him, and we're to give Him the credit for it. And you ever notice how many times in the Bible God is referred to as the Father, God the Father? Stop and think about that. There's some responsibilities with goes with that title, the Father. A father is a provider. A father is a protector. A father is a sustainer and director and strengthener of the household. And that's what really God is to us. And we should be thankful for that we've got a God, and He is our Father, and He watches over His children and protect us. And He's referred to so many times as a Father who art in heaven. But you know, just as real, He's in heaven, but we can feel that protecting, guiding, providing hand upon us every day that we lived. And this lesson is to give us an awareness. And think about it, Eden must have been a wonderful place that He built. Everything that man needed was provided there for him, and even the breath of life came there at that time. And it was created by God. And then over and over in the Bible it's referred to, and every time Eden, the Garden of Eden that God gave and God perfected for us, it's always referred to in a holy light, lifted up. And it's referred to in the Bible in Genesis that we read today as the Garden of Eden. It's a place of perfection. Everything made by God exactly as it should be and exactly as He wants to be. Ezekiel referred to it in the Old Testament as the Garden of God. In other words, He formed it. He made it exactly as He wanted it to be. It's God's garden. And we look back at the Garden of Eden. And then Genesis, again, it refers to it as the garden of the Lord. Every time, everything was there. All the provisions, all the blessings it had came directly for God and for you and me. The first thing after He created the wondrous universe, and we can read it, day 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5, and on up to the day 6, the things that He made. But after He made the wondrous universe of stars, and you know, that's something that's almost unfathomable. I know that many times David the psalmist, right? He must have been with the sheep in the dark of the night and looked up and he saw the stars and the moon and the sun by day and all the things, and he must have been astounded. And there must have been an appreciation there too. But after he had created all these other things, God planted a garden. Did you ever think about that? He made it exactly the way that it should be. The herbs that were there, the trees that were there, provisions for man. He's a planter. He's a sustainer. He's an originator. He's the author of all we have. And then after He did that, He placed man in that garden. Don't that sound familiar to you? Think of all the good things He's done for us, surrounded us with the blessings that we've got, and He put us right in the middle of them, all for us, made for us by Him. And you know what He did on that 6th day after all these things were created, after man was created? He stepped back for a moment and then looked at the creation of what He had done, and He said, it was good. It was very good. In fact, He said, in other words, it's exactly like He wanted it for man. That was the Garden of Eden. That was created for us, and that's what we're to protect and that we're to preserve. And we still enjoy it. As we go through the lesson, we'll say that. He said it was good. The herbs and the fruit trees, everything that was provided for man that was needed to sustain him for him. And He said, it's yours. I've made it, Adam. And all you've got to do is preserve it and enjoy it and till it and protect it and keep it. So you see, with it, He gave us a responsibility of the things that we should. And then the Bible goes on and says after that, and in the book of Genesis, and after that it said He formed every beast of the field, all of the animals, the things that were there, and He created the birds that fly in the skies, and we can think how marvelous and wondrous, and to know that He numbers them. He said even the smallest one of them that I've created, when it falls, I'm aware of it, and I know that. So you see, nothing was overlooked, nothing was forgotten in what He did for us at that time. And then, almost matter of factly, Moses said, when he wrote this book of Genesis, he said, he almost said, he created them, these animals and these birds out of the ground, just like He created man, you and me, created them exactly the same way. But there was a difference. And He did, and out of the ground He formed every beast of the field and all of them, And he said he called them before Adam. He said we're to have dominion over them. Dominion means to be rulers over, to be protectors, to be responsible, and to have the authority over them at that time. And he said, he called them up and he said, Adam, I'm bringing them before you one by one, and I want you to name those animals and those birds that fly in the sky. And you know, as I studied the lesson, I thought about that. How did he name them? What did he look at? Did he name them by their characteristics, how they acted, the things that they did, by their size, or did he just have a name that he wanted to place on them so they could be identifiable? And I thought about the lion, about the power and the strength and the roar that they had, how that they had dominion over so many of the animals that were out there for that time. But he said he called them up, and Adam called every creature, Adam called every living creature what was be the name thereof. That was the first sign of our dominion over the animals, because man determined the names or the identifications of them that time. And he gave the name to all the cattle and to the fowl of the air and to every beast of the field. But then there was a catch. When they called these animals up, but did you ever think God over and over said, be fruitful and multiply the earth? That stroke is showing up again, so forgive me. I'll have to stop and pause for just a moment. But he that shows dominion over them, that he was the ruler. He allowed Adam to man it. But he must have called them up two by two. And every giraffe, every animal, every wolf, every lamb, a male and a female, they had to do that to say, be fruitful and multiply the earth. And he called them for that. But you know what that pointed out? It showed that while Adam named them, whether it was by their characteristics or however he did, he saw that there was something that was missing with Adam. Adam, it says, but for Adam there was not found a helpmate for him. And in other words, the male and the female animals to work with together, to reproduce, and to fill the earth that was void of others and void of life at that time. But not Adam. That Adam did, and he said it brought out that, and it shows the importance of the man and the wife, husband and wife, the relationship, how each one of us has got a role that we're to play, and how we're a helpmate to one another, and to each one is to offset the weaknesses of the others with the strength that God put on them. And when the naming was done, the dominion was placed, it said then that Adam realized that he was without. He didn't have these things at that time. But there was a difference. There was a difference in the animals, even though Moses just said, and he made them from the ground just like he made man, matter-of-factly. Men, the difference in men, you and I, the creation of God, is we have souls. And we have the ability to think and to plan, and the ability to know right from wrong. Think of the animals. They have instincts that God gave them to protect them, to react to danger and for survival and things. But that's the difference with you and me, the ability to think souls within us to survive and to commune with God and to recognize God and to value God. So that's the difference in how blessed we are. And he said he had done these things. And you know, animals only have instincts, and most of all, men was given a conscience. Do you ever think about that? I don't think that the wolf or the lamb or the lion or whatever we might see out there had a conscience to say, well, you know, I'm sorry that I took the life of that one, or I devoured that one, or something else that was wrong. But God gave man a conscience, you and me, and that's one great difference with God, to know right from wrong, to have a desire, to have an awareness of our Maker and Creator, and to have the desire to go and to feel offended, to know that we've done something wrong, and we give us the opportunity to correct it at that time. But to know the difference between neither, and is a conscience really important? Is that a big part of our creation? 31 times in the New Testament, the conscience, man's conscience, is referred to. If God preserved it that many times in the New Testament, he had a value of it. It was a great possession that he gave us, something that the animals and even the unbelievers that reject God and totally turned from his son wouldn't have, but he gave it to you and me. And 31 times the New Testament reminds us over and over, it's a gift from God. It's valuable, and it's a thing that we need to preserve and that we need to keep. And then God spoke to man, and that's another difference too. In the Garden of Eden, it said that Adam and Eve walked with God, communed with God, and he was a visible part of their life, and there was a fellowship, a relationship there before sin stepped into the world and separated them at that time. But the Bible doesn't say that God walked with the animals, because God made us gave us a dominion over them, and we'll come to that in the lesson later on. But I guess that's the blessing of the Garden of Eden, is man and woman walked with God and kept him. And then he says, as always, the commandments that God did, he said them to be, I placed you there. I've given you everything that you need. And now be fruitful and multiply. And God blessed him and said unto him, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it. And have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowls of the air and over every living thing. And God said, well, I've given you every herb and every fruit-bearing tree for your sustenance, for you to feed, and it's there for you to till. And it says, and which is the fruit, and he referred to the fruit and the herbs as our meat, the things that we would eat. And I have to go touch on in the lesson. I had a hard time understanding that. When did the meat eating come into it? He said herbs and fruits of the trees, but then he said these will be shall be our meat. And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth wherein there is life, I've given every green herb for meat, and it was so. After he created all of these things, he said, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. He said, then out of the ground he made the animals and the birds, and he gave Adam dominion over them, to actually be aware of them. And if we have dominion over something, we're caretakers of them. We protect them, and to see that they are guarded. How many times have you read in the paper? I remember years ago when somewhere here in Tennessee they discovered a little minnow, snail darter. Do you remember that? That was in the streams, and it was on the verge of becoming extinct. But everything that God gave us is important, and nothing is wasted. Everything plays into God's plans and provisions for the animals and the fishes and for men also. And great lengths were gone. I guess millions of dollars were spent trying to keep that snail darter alive, and it succeeded. It lives, it's here, it's gone. It did survive. Whatever its role is, whatever part in God's plans, they preserved it. Sometimes we do things right, I guess. Sometimes we say, well, God, I don't understand what's there, but I know that you made it for a purpose, and it's going to last. And he made them, and he gave dominion over, and then he named them, and that was a part of be fruitful and govern in everything that you do. And then we'll go down to further, and we'll turn away from the book of Genesis to the book of Psalms. Now, I guess I always say that's the redback hymnals that we sing out of every Sunday morning. I kind of think those are going to be the Psalms from our generation to pass on to the next, the old rugged cross, and those songs that have meaning and touch us. But think about David, that songwriter, that king that came from a shepherd boy. How many times he must have looked at up at those, and he said in the book of Psalms, the 8th chapter, 1 verses 1 through 9, he says he not only made us stewards over his work. When we're stewards, it means that we're to take the possessions that God has entrusted us with. And sometimes that's witnessing. Sometimes that's sharing with other people, telling them about the Christ that we have and that we value in our life today. But then he said, I've done more than that. I said, you have crowned man, God. David said, you looked up to the skies. And maybe he was on the hillside this time. I don't know where he was. Maybe he was fleeing from Saul for his very life. Maybe he was living in the cage. Maybe he had a handful of men that was with him and a multitude of others out there that Saul was sent about. Maybe he was in the wilderness where other people didn't want to go. But he said, you've crowned man. You've crowned man with glory. When I consider thy heavens, can't you get a picture of that? Can't you picture a shepherd boy that was not even considered to be one that would be chosen to follow and to be the king over all Israel, with a flock of sheep that he was given because he was young and inexperienced and overlooked by the others and thought not worthy to do the things that could be recognized, laying out on the hillside of night, looking up into the skies and seeing the stars and the moon and all the things that were there, and saying, when I consider thy heavens, the work of thy fingers. God, you made them, every one of those. And I thought about too, you know, David in that time that lived, they didn't have telescopes that could reach up into the sky and discover other planets or the Milky Way or all those other things. But he looked up and he said, they're great and you created them and he can't even fathom them. Today, we discovered other planets that are out there that were unknown far before. And you know what? David wasn't living in just a corner of the world. You and I are not just living in the corner of the world, because the expanse of that is unfathomable. God created it all. We can't imagine it. We can't picture it. I read last week in the paper, it said the planet Pluto. I don't know much about Pluto, but it happened that a scientist in Germany had this telescope and was studying Pluto, looking at it, when an asteroid or something came and hit Pluto, at that planet, and it flared up and it caused a great explosion. It was there, and it was the second time in all of history that it was actually recorded. Something like that happened. That's how aware we are of the creation out there. Men study them and they see them. I don't know how much credit they give to God, but he's the maker of it. And David looked up and he said, when I consider the heavens, the work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars, which you've ordained, you made them, you put them in place. You gave them the cycles or the circles that they're to make, and you keep them in place, and nothing gets out of place. For one star to get out of place could be a disastrous thing, but yet God, he made them, and he put them in the orbit that they were to be in. And then he said, when you've done all of these things, what is man? Man, you know, we feel that we're great, we're capable, we can accomplish so many things. We look for fame, we look for fortune, we look for power and these things. But David said, what is man? You know what he was? He was a shepherd boy on the hillside looking up at the skies and saying, God, what a wonderful creation you made. And looking at himself, a little maybe 15 or 16-year-old boy on the hillside with the only responsibility, a flock of sheep that were sleeping, getting ready to go to the fields and the streams the next day for him to care for. And he said, what is man? He said, how important are we? We said, we're stewards, but we've got to realize that we are stewards. God has put us in charge of all that he's made, and he's put us in charge too of our own future, to recognize his son, to accept him, to look at them. Have we lived up to our responsibility? I guess that's what I got to ask. If the streams are filled with litter, I don't guess we have. If we're content to follow, you know, for 35 years I made Coca-Cola bottles at Chattanooga Glass Company, and they made those bottles, and we shipped them all over the country, and they would refill them, bring them back, wash them. And the grocers didn't like that because they had to sort them. They had to clean them. And the delivery men didn't want them because they had to gather them up and bring them back. So they came up with aluminum, and after that, plastic to make them easier to haul, not as heavy to haul as in a truck as the bottles were at that time. Pretty soon, no more returnable bottles. Those things were gone. Nothing else worked for them at that time. But we're a disposable society. We won't turn on a computer, and if it takes a minute to do, we get upset and we get on the phone and call them and ask them, is it gone down? Why is it not working? And then the message pops up to us. An instant society. He said, well, what is man? We feel we're so important that everything that God made, everything that happens is to cater to us and to make us all. And David, he realized our dependence on God. Psalms 3-7, if we read those, he said he's struggling over the threat of his enemies. If he's hiding from Saul, possibly, and hiding in the wilderness and caves. Then in Psalms 8, the one that we're looking at there, he changes that from fear and hiding. In the 8th Psalms, just 5 Psalms later, he's praising God for his strength, for his protection, for his provision, and all of those things. And he speaks of the majesty of God. And that's what we've got to do. We've got to have the awareness of him so that everything that we see, we recognize that God made it and how great he is and his plan and that we're a part of it. And he said, what is man? This small, insignificant, we're just a speck in all the things that God has created. Yet he loves us, and he's aware of us, and he provides for us. What is man? You're mindful of him. And then the Son of Man, that shall visit him. For there is made, he said, God, why are you here? I'm a shepherd boy on the hillside, but I know that you've made us and me just a little bit lower than the angels in heaven. Do you ever think about that? That should give us pride. That should give it a feeling of importance, not from what we've done, but from what God's for us, a little bit lower. And you said, and you crowned him with glory. You give him the ability to think, to plan, to worship, and awareness, to know right from wrong. And it's a blessing to crown with glory and honor. And we're masterfully made. And there's made him to have dominion over all the works of the things that you created. They're his. They're made for him. Thou hast put all things under his feet. You know, in the Bible, when it talks about things being under the feet, it means that we overcome it. We've perfected it. We've protected it. And he said that all things, we're in control. God has given us the ability to overcome and to serve him in all the things that they do. And he said we even made a little bit less than the angels that are out there. And even though we're no more than a speck in the universe, David was a shepherd. Even the Lord referred to as. Have you ever thought about that? Why he rose up from the status of a lowly shepherd boy? Sometimes Christ was referred to as our shepherd and our keeper, our provider, our protector, and a watcher over us that time. Caretaker, protector, and provider. In fleeing or in battle, David sought God's direction in everything that he did. Even as he began on this path to his king, when he saw that God had ordained him and God had called on him, and God had gave him wonderful victories with a handful of men against a multitude of an army, but yet David would seek God's advice and say, God, should I go against the Philistines? Should I go against this army? Should I fight against them? And he depended on God for the things that he should do. And I guess that's a part of his greatness. And that's what we should do in God's creation. Know that he's given it all, but we should depend on him and for everything that we do. And then we go to I said to the covenant that God had made with Noah. And as I said before, I struggle to search for when it changed from man eating on the herbs and the fruit of the trees to being carnivorous, or to being flesh eating as we are. And you know when it happened? It happened when sin had come into the world and overcome, and when Noah made the ark and it loaded the animals there, and he gave them the same instructions that God had given before, to be fruitful and to multiply. And God blessed Noah and his sons. But you know, there's a story to that. And he said that it's a covenant. The first covenant that was made was between Adam and God. God said, in a covenant, the one in the strongest position would dictate the terms, and he would set the rewards and the punishment for it. And the one with the less control to abide and just to receive these things would abide by that and do their part. The first covenant was made with God, and God made with Adam. He said, Adam, I've given you everything that you need, the trees, the herbs, they're all yours, and to watch over for you at that time. And they said, all you've got to do, there's one tree in that garden, that vast garden that must be out there. And he said, don't eat don't eat of that one tree. That's the things you could do. And it was a covenant, and we can see just how important covenants are. Go through in the Bible and look at them. An agreement with God, our surrendering to Him, our promise to Him, means more than anything else anything else that we would do. And it was the same way with Adam. It was the same way with Noah at that time when the agreement was made. And God's covenant with Noah made it in chapter 9. And we know the story. We're familiar with it all. When sin had crept into the world, come there and was a part of the changed the relationship with man. That's what happened. That and what a covenant. It's agreeable. It's an agreement that we make with God, and how the breaking of a covenant, our agreement with God, the things we do, how important and how disastrous it could be with us that time. But in the garden was the first one. Think of another covenant. Think of God's covenant to Abraham. He said, Abraham, I'm going to make you father of many nations, and your offspring, your children, be as numerous as the stars in the sky. Another reference to God's creations there at that time. And he said, all you've got to do is step out in faith, Abraham. Believe in me, trust in me, and have faith in my word and my promise that I'll make you this. And even though he was a rich man, I guess, and even though he was influential, he left everything behind, Abraham did. And we could see the things that sprang from him by doing that. Third covenant we could look at, it was also in the Old Testament, and that was with Noah. And God told him, well, we know that sin had come upon the world, and he said, Noah, I want you to build an ark. And maybe it was in the middle of a place that didn't know rainfall that much. And it took him a year to build it, put it all together, and to have it there that time. And then he said, and then I want you to gather your sons and your daughters and their wife into the arks and the animals and preserve them. And you know, it shows just how merciful God is. It said that after he did that, after the year of building that ark, God left the door open 7 days so other people could have believed and come in. And God himself then closed the door of the ark, and the rains came and the floods came. And we're all familiar with the story of that time, what did happen there at that time. But it was a covenant that was made, and it was kept by God, and they were blessed because of it. Earlier with God, and he said, and how many times you said, I wish that I had a chance, and I've said it myself too many times, I think. We yearn for that opportunity, and we say, if I could just live my life over, how I would change things, the things that I would do different. When I was young and when we were strong and we were in good health, and we could have done so much for God, and we could have maybe gained a greater education even, so that we would be more effective and produce more. And I would treat people differently. I'd raise my family different, we would say it. We yearn for that time of beginning again and start over. Think of what a merciful God we've got. It was that way with Noah. He said, Noah, I've made man and given them everything, and it's gone all right. He said, now we're going to start all over again. We're going to give an opportunity to erase all the evil and the sins of the past, and to bless and to be a part of it, and to close the doors, and they came. Many times I've thought that. But think of how much, if God did leave the door open 7 days for others to come in, that's how many times that he's talked to you and me.